Recognise this? I'm guessing most of you do, and the rest of you probably only need one further clue. The word iconic may be annoying and overused, but screw it. These are two of the most iconic riffs of all time that together make one of the most famous intros in pop history. A song that has over 700 million plays on Spotify, that's been covered this many times, and has been played on radio, it's fair to say, a lot. If you decided you wanted to buy Smokey Robinson, the song's main writer, you'd better be able to put your hands on $160 million, because that's what he's worth these days. He's said that no matter where in the world he performs, the audience cheers the moment they hear those opening bass notes. Notes that he didn't write. And if you decided you wanted to buy the man who did, James Jamerson, you probably could for the price of a bottle of cheap booze. Back in the 80s anyway, before he died, penniless, having been paid about the same as the man who wrote the song's guitar riff, session player Robert White. For their day's work on My Girl, jointly creating the bit of this massive song that everyone most remembers, they were each paid slightly more than the studio's receptionist, only slightly mind. But why is this, and how is it Smokey Robinson's fault? All will be explained. It goes without saying that the music biz is harshly capitalist. Less acknowledged is the number of beloved artists that go gleefully along with this while painting themselves as honest, humble folk, forced against their own principles to fraternise with a corrupt industry. Examples of this hypocrisy include Kurt Cobain, whose punk credentials didn't stop him adjusting Nirvana's income split hugely in his own favour, then backdating the change so his bandmates ended up in debt to him. Led Zeppelin built a countercultural image partly off the back of songs stolen from the poor blues artists they claimed to revere. Captain Beefheart projected childlike innocence while subjecting his band to mental abuse and stealing their ideas. But worst of all, Bono. These are some of the big, loud examples, but a lot of artist hypocrisy is subtler. To return to My Girl, the reason the composers of those big riffs weren't paid is that they weren't songwriters, but arrangers. Songwriters get royalties known as publishing, while arrangers don't. So why do you get paid for writing some notes and not others? Especially when you wrote the best ones. Well, the arrangement is a collective noun for the decoration of a song's basic chords and melody, string parts, bass lines, vocal harmonies, plus decisions about genre, rhythm and tempo. In the 50s, the music industry's division of labour was clear. Songwriters wrote songs, A&R men paired them with singers, arrangers set the musical scenery, and producers ran the sessions. Songwriters got writing royalties, singers got performing royalties, producers got production royalties, and arrangers got told to fuck off and take their two-figure flat fee with them. But why? Because legally, every note written by an arranger belongs to the song's writer or copyright holder for two very good reasons. First, arrangements change from version to version, and some songs get arranged thousands of times. We can't exactly award songwriting credit to everyone who ever covered Heart of Gold and added their own guitar solo. Sorry, Colin from Two Doors Down, that's just the way it is. And secondly, arrangements, being usually based on the song's chords or melody, are legally classed as derivative works and not original works. Makes perfect sense, right? But music is art and not science, so any attempt to apply a legal formula to it is bound to produce absurdity, such as the one that says Robert White deserves no songwriting credit for his My Girl riff, because it's just part of the arrangement, not part of the song, right?
Sunshine.
Yeah, that riff's not part of the song. It's merely regarded as indispensable by practically everyone who's ever covered it. Also, isn't it silly to prize songwriting over a derivative work when the songwriter brought this and the work derived was this? It'd be like giving the copyright in Sunflowers to the guy that invented circles. That string part, the third most well-known element of the song, was written by Motown's in-house arranger, Paul Reiser, who was paid salary. Now you might say, so what? This is what they signed up for, those arrangers and session players. They knew the deal going in. But from day one, this supposedly clear division of labour really wasn't so clear. My Girl is great, but it wouldn't be half as good without its arrangement, which contains all its best ideas. With the advent of rock music and the singer-songwriter, the lines are about to get blurred even further. By the end of the 60s, most bands wrote their own material and did their own arrangements. And if the writing wasn't collective, the arranging usually was. Painstaking group efforts by the same people who then slogged their guts out on tour for years of tiny gigs, sleeping on floors with no promise of reward until finally, as a team, they might just get within reach of success. Presumably, the songwriters in such bands were mindful of the fact that it was thanks to such collective labour that their song copyrights now stood a chance of being worth something and shared that wealth accordingly. The old argument about knowing what they signed up for rarely applied here. Bands were made up of naive kids who knew nothing about copyrights or much else, something the music business took full advantage of by signing them to exploitative deals. Sadly, the members of those bands, rather than fight that system, tended to embody it by fighting each other for the biggest slice of what was left of them. Take the New York band Television. Their 4 members were each highly skilled, and as a team they combined rock and jazz elements to create complex arrangements that took months to complete. Their debut album makes pretty much every greatest of all time list thanks to this group effort. Yet songwriter Tom Verlaine took over 95% of the songwriting royalties for himself. Verlaine's songs were effective but basic, evocative lyrics recited over standard 3-chord progressions. Strip the arrangements away and few would give them a second look. But copyright law was in full support of Verlaine, stating that as the author of the vocal melodies, lyrics and chords, he was legally entitled to all the money. It further states, indirectly but emphatically, that the collective enhancement of his bandmates that did so much to elevate those songs into works of real beauty that are studied and revered to this day was worth nothing. It's time for a message from my sponsor, Honest Value Coffee. You know, when my throat gets dry during a long shoot, there's nothing I like more than a hot cup of caffeinated drinking granules. And with its notes of ashtray water and boiled strychnine, this wakes me up like the clappers. Honest Value Coffee may cause sneezing. We can keep listing similar examples forever. Brian Jones' marimba in Under My Thumb, Herbie Flowers' bass in Walk on the Wild Side, Andy Summers' guitar in Every Breath You Take, all defining elements that the song's writer was, in every case, happy to steal all the credit and money for. A rare few bands took a fairer approach. The Doors contained 2 songwriters but split the money 4 ways. Other 70s bands who shared publishing equally included Black Sabbath, 10cc and the Sex Pistols. But by the 80s, new approaches to making music were showing the songwriting arranging divide for the nonsense it so often was. The first sign was post-punk. Bands like Public Image Limited and Joy Division had no songwriters as such. Their songs grew from the collective pooling of riffs, beats and vocals. The arrangements were the songs. There was little you could strum alone on an acoustic guitar. This wasn't entirely new. James Brown's music had a similar basis, but Brown was a solo act and stole all the credit for himself. These bands were groups of equals, and with punk's questioning of the old ways, the sharing of credit was the natural result. But hip-hop and the various early forms of dance music took things further, in some cases abandoning anything older generations would recognise as music.
Got so much trouble on my mind, refuse to lose. Here's your ticket.
Now you try humming that. If you can hum that, I'll give you £100. It's no tune. With a song legally defined as being chords, melody and lyrics, Public Enemy's Chuck D probably could have made the case that as the lyricist in a band whose music was cut-up noises with no chords or melody, he was the only member doing any songwriting and should be awarded all the publishing. But he did the decent thing and shared it with the guys making the noises. In some cases, the elevation of the songwriter can seem like the cult of the director in movies, a fiction that casts a group effort as the work of one, or in this case two, geniuses. My Girl, credited to Smokey Robinson and Ronald White, but borne aloft on the contributions of Robert White, James Jamerson and Paul Reiser, was also helped by the Temptations' vocal arrangement, whose answering parts and harmonies were the making of a chorus that wasn't really happening beforehand.
My girl, talking loud.
I'm not advocating for any change in the law here. It wouldn't be practical for the reasons laid out earlier. Giving an arranger publishing on a song has to be at the discretion of the songwriter. I just find it scandalous how rarely that happens. We see artists as countercultural and rebellious when it turns out that a lot of that is just the acting out of people with nothing to lose. Give them something to lose and they just turn into everyone else, happy to focus on what legalities entitle them to do to the exclusion of what morality might compel them to do, like the capitalist scum they are deep down. And I should know, 'cause I'm one of them, perched here on my throne, surrounded by luxury, a roof over my head and all the coffee I can drink. While others shiver and starve, I sit here and think to myself, oh well, wasn't me. Thanks for watching. Next week I'll pursue the songwriting versus arrangement theme with the ultimate case study, Bittersweet Symphony, which I promise you was a whole mess of nonsense. I really do treat you all far too well. Meanwhile, here's 2 from the back catalogue and a subscribe button. Until then...